Dhillan, thanks for joining. And thanks to BCI for hosting this event, right? Like, just to start off with, Dhillan, I spent the last couple of days kind of reading about you, and you've led a really interesting life, a life that a lot of other people have not led. You have had so many bloody hats, like you're a boulder, you developed Sethan, you're a writer, like your writing is really good. I really liked it. You've been a podcaster, and right now you're a father as well, right? And the writing that you have done, and I hope you bring it out through this conversation that we have today, is like a really rare combination of literary depth. Like some of the things you write, I love the allegories that you spoke about.
Mm,
There's a lot of literary depth, and you also have political honesty, which is not something that a lot of people are able to do. And yeah, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But to start off on a really easy note, Dylan, when was the first time you touched rock? And when did you fall in love with it?
ooh, uh, just trying to see if I can get an exact date. Okay. First of all, thank you for that long introduction and all the honorific titles and the hats and all those things. Uh,
Yeah.
I don't really look at myself as one of those versatile types. I mean, it's more like a weave and an amalgam that all exists in one little tight, interconnected, but essential molecule, if you will. I don't look at these all as separate parts. So there is that for whatever it's worth. When's the first time I touched rock? 2010. Yeah. The first time I touched plastic was also 2010. And I think I started climbing at an indoor wall, or it was a climbing wall, an artificial wall, I'll call it, not indoor, because it wasn't really indoor. It was the
Mm.
old climbing wall at Kandiva Stadium. That's where I
Mm.
started climbing. And then rock would have been a little bit after that, just a couple of months later, June or July of
Okay.
2010, sometime then.
Okay. And then, I mean, what drew you to it? Why did you dedicate so much of your life to it after that introduction to rock pretty late in your life, actually?
Yep, yep. I would say if we are to talk about the career graph of an athlete, then that was definitely late or later. I mean,
Yeah.
although that is its own conversation, right? I mean, we're so used to believing that athletes have to be young and in their prime and all of that. And, that's not really a philosophy I subscribe to very much, but we'll get to that conversation a bit later.
Yeah.
But to answer another question, when's the first time I fell in love? Oh my God, man, it was it was a process, you know. I would say I really liked it the first time. Um, and also because I wasn't very immediately good at it. I was good, but I was not like woo. I was just not cruising.
Yeah.
Um, I wasn't good in that way, and obviously there was an appeal over there to try and get good at it. And then it's just the deeper I got into it, the more fun it was. I wasn't really thinking of being in love and, forging an identity with the outdoors and, making nature connectedness a part of my life and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
It was just a lot of fun. It gave me access to another type of community that I didn't have. I would say the depth of my relationship with it probably um, increased as the years went on, but it really, really intensified after maybe 2 to 3 years.
Okay. I mean, I just want to go back to that time a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people who are coming into climbing in India right now are
Hmm.
doing that like post-pandemic. Started taking off now. But what was climbing like in the early 2010s in India or in South India? I think oh yeah, you're still there. Yeah.
Sorry, could you come
And
again with that?
my question was that what was climbing like in Bangalore, in South India in the early 2010s? Because a lot of people have really joined climbing now.
Oh, very competition oriented. Very.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say like the previous generation, the guys who were climbing in the late 90s and the early 2000s, I think that was a point at which rock and, federal comps were mixing. But by the time I was in, anyone who was climbing seriously was, which translates to climbing hard, it was in the competitive circuit. And people put a lot of pressure on you to go that way, which is like, ಇಲ್ಲ ಕಣೋ ಝೋನಲ್ಸ್ ಮಾಡಲೇಬೇಕು, ಝೋನಲ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಮೆಡಲ್ ಬರಲೇಬೇಕು, ನ್ಯಾಷನಲ್ಸ್ ಬಂದು ಕ್ವಾಲಿಫೈ ಆಗಲೇಬೇಕು, ಅದೇ ಹಂಗೆ ಇರಬೇಕು. I mean, it was the accepted path. And and I'm not gonna sit here and shit on it, because there was a reason, and a very valid class and socioeconomic reason why it went that way. But it was there. It
Yeah.
was all
And
about the
yeah.
class. And rock as its own thing was, it was more of an off season. Oh, if you're already kind of over the hill and past the comps, and now you're just having fun with the sport and not really looking at yourself as an athlete. There was that sort of stuff. And there was maybe one guy that I could think of who had given up the comps and who was super serious about rock and was climbing at a high level on rock.
Okay. I mean, I read your article on this topic as well. I think published in 2018 about how climbing had entered the Olympics, how it was a really big deal, and oh, hey,
Mm,
we should maybe not think of it only from a competition perspective, but also about climbing on rocks. But I do want to take a diversion from that topic, because I think the thing that you're really, really well known for in the climbing community in India now is the development of Sethan. And
mm,
development itself is such a big term, right? And
mm.
it's something you've been doing for what, the last 10 years, maybe
Yep.
more?
Yep. 10 years now.
And you've developed 400 routes in Sethan, which is an insane number
I
for
don't know.
one person to do, right?
I think the number somewhere between 400 and 500. I don't have like an actual count. Like, I can't tell you it's
Yeah.
423 and so on. But it sits in
You
that
have a tally on your
range,
wall every
400 to
time you,
450. Yeah, somewhere there.
yeah.
Like, I could
Yeah,
look at
yeah.
my
I
documentation and
mean,
give you exact numbers, but it's irrelevant at the moment.
it doesn't matter, but for most people, the idea of development is so overwhelming. How did you come up?
Yeah.
Like, how did you go to Sethan and think like, okay, I'm going to develop this place now? Like, what was that thought process when you got there? How did you get there?
Ah, uh, funny selection of pictures, because two of these are still projects. I haven't done them. But yeah, but it's just a side note. How did I get to Sethan? Okay. I'll first talk about how my interest in development came about, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll get to how Sethan happened. Dude, as regards development, I would say there was something intrinsic in me that was always very attracted to the what ifs, right? I was very attracted to potential. And even in my pre-Sethan days, when I spent a lot of years in Hampi, I was always interested to see, I don't know, features drew me, new lines, potential, it spoke to me. It was just one of those things. And then I developed a really close relationship with Phil Lockie, who is the primary developer of Hampi and of the Chandra Valley and all the, the areas over there, Chodadara and Chatru and Parashigri and all of that.
Yeah.
And I was reading on an article at the time about how there were a bunch of Indian climbers that had broken the V11 ceiling, and it was, oh my God, we 8A. It was the big thing back then, right? And, it was one season where there was so much of this V11 herd immunity that had come. And that was the, that was the winter of 2014, Jan 2014. The winter season, when one after another kind of sort of broke that ceiling. And it felt like a bit of an important moment for Indian climbing. And I remember in December of 2013, Tuhin Satarkar from Pune, he had climbed Ganesh, which was 8 people, and it was this mythical route at that time. I still remember people used to come, stand under the route, look at it, and then just simply say, just admire it like it's the freaking Taj Mahal, and then walk off. It was almost like I'm not even worthy of pulling on the holes. And, it was quite the moment when Tuhin broke through that.
Yeah.
So I was working on this article about this new wave of Indian bouldering and hard climbing, and naturally a lot of the hard stuff was being done in Hampi, the boulders that is. So I went to talk to Pill about this, and Pill and I really struck up a friendship, a deep relationship, and he was eating oatmeal when I met him the first time, and I think he just come back from one of his caves that he was staying at. And then he just looked at me and he had this thing. He's like, "Oh, so you like bouldering, yeah?" And he was just so excited to talk to someone who was in a bouldering. And man, the stories came and they came and they came and they came, and I was just so inspired um, by how much he had done. It still blows me away. His
For people who
development.
may not
In,
know, who is Phil?
yeah, but he's a climber who's from England originally. Someone who's started, uh, he was a traddie. He started with a trad background and then sort of transitioned into becoming a lifetime boulderer. And he came to Hampi first in 1993. And since then, it was done by Bill.
Yeah.
So he spoke a lot about this process of looking for new lines, and it connected with me. And then so that was the next natural step for me. It didn't feel like this is something I have to do. It just felt like this is something that appealed to my heart, my soul at a very deep level.
Yeah. I
And
mean, so go, please go ahead. Like, so you were inspired by Pill. You wanted to find your own place to develop, I guess. So was that the emotion that you got from that conversation?
I don't know if I wanted to find my own
Hmm.
place. It was more like I always had huh, imagine if there's an entire valley, an alpine
What
valley,
if?
untouched.
What if?
What if,
Yeah.
right? What if, like hypothetical scenario? It's just full of these amazing blocks, and none of them are done. And you could just run around and look at one boulder and another and another and another and another, and there's an endless supply of classic, incredible new lines to be done. And so
Yeah.
that was just a thought that was in my head. And in 2016, a friend of mine, Kaushik, who's from Hampi, oddly, he was taking a friend on a hike from Jagatsuk all the way up to Sethan Dome and then down. And he came down. His descent was through the Pandropa side, and he took a few pictures. And he came back, and I was staying in Vashisht at the time. And he showed me these pictures, and I still remember exactly what he said to me. He says, "Ana sikkapate boulders ide ana nodbeku neevu." That translates to anyone who doesn't understand Kannada. That translates to, "Bro, there are just too many boulders. You have to go check it out."
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, I don't speak Kannada, but I got that the vibe from what he was trying to say.
yeah, and there was a brown speck next to one of the blocks that
Hmm.
he showed me. And in the pictures they look kind of small, like these small scrambly little things. But except when I zoomed in, that brown speck happened to be a cow, and the block happened to be like about 5, 7 times the size of that cow. Maybe 7 or 8 of those cows, and it still wouldn't be the size of the block. And that's when the scale of the boulders hit me. And man, I was like, I have to go here. I just must.
Yeah.
I can't. It's a disservice to myself if I don't. And it was peak monsoon, peak monsoon when we first landed there. It was August 1st. There were 5 of us. There was Vikas, who's otherwise called Jerry, also from Hampi. There was Madhu, um, now quite a renowned hole shaper in the country. Uh, Ale and Arlo, my partner and my son, and then me. And then the 5 of us landed over there on August 1st, 2016. And I was blown away, man. I was in a fever dream. It was ridiculous.
But like, how do you actually develop a boulder, right? Like most of these boulders up in that valley over there are just like covered with moss. Like you can't even see the line. Like, like what is the process? Do you just bolt something up there, rappel down, and just clean everything? Like, what is the actual process for
Bolt,
developing bloody
no bolts.
400 roots?
No, no, no. I don't see. So it depends on where the blocks are located, right?
Yeah.
If they're in a sort of open meadow or a talus field, typically the amount of moss is less, but the ones deep in the forests, they have more moss. But the features always show. Of course, some of them are covered with like entire carpets of moss, but you just get this feeling looking at the angle, looking at the
Mm.
orientation, looking at the way two angles interact with each other. You're like, there could be something here. And then you brush a couple of holes, and then you use a stick brush and you shove some moss off, and then you see a ledge, and then you see a crimp, and then you see a blunt brow, and you're like, nah, this could be a thing. And then you just start brushing. So, and over time, you develop a good eye, and you develop a sound enough intuition, and you develop the sort of framework of reasoning for whether or not something is possible or not. I mean, there are these certain ways in which boulders appear, like a
Yeah.
boulder, a certain type of overhang that's usually a dihedral. You tend
Mm.
to get good feet. You look a little bit, you even feel through the moss, and you will find some crimps, you will find some, pinches, whatever.
Mm.
But really, there are days when you think something's going to be an awesome block, and you brush it, and there's like perfect rail to start, perfect hold, and then this
Nothing.
somewhat blank sequence, and then another sequence of holes, and you're just like, why? Fuck, why? If you the second picture, right?
Yeah.
The overhang is it. It would be a dream, but there just aren't holes on the overhang. So what I'm brushing is really the
Mm.
arete.
Mm.
But the overhang has unfortunately got nothing. But it's like a 50 or 55-degree overhang with an absolutely flat landing.
Yeah.
But the holes just aren't there. Uh,
Yeah.
so, hey man, this does happen. It still happens. But Sethan as a place in general has rock that is incredibly featured.
Mm.
So
No,
you're bound to
this
run into some sort of collection features that would make a line.
this reminds me. I was climbing in Australia one time, and I got these like sequence of jugs. I was just like, wow, this jug is so perfect for my hand. It's amazing. And
Mhm.
then after I finished the climb, the local I was climbing with told me that they were all just drilled out. So like there's a featureless wall. And back in the day, like some 30, 40 years ago, just got a drill and they just drilled into the rock to make a route where it shouldn't exist, I guess.
Oh
Not
yeah, yeah.
something
This
that
was
you
common
something you should be
practice.
doing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's insane now, but back then it made a lot of sense. You know, one thing, Dylan,
Oh,
is
this was
when
the
we
story
spoke.
of Humpy too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, 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 yeah. Some of the most Humpy started initially as a bit of a sport climbing area, and
Yeah,
there was a French team that was making a movie over there, and this was the year 1994, and they had come with Isabelle Patissier, who was the world champion at the time, and there was one very specific arete. The line kind of went like this. And
mm,
what they wanted was a crossover move, something where she's holding onto a crimp like this, and then she crosses into a pocket, and then she turns
mm.
this way. So the camera would be here, and it would capture her blonde hair and a bit of her chest, and it would be a bit of a glam shot. And the film director was not a climber. He was from a French television network, but he put a lot of pressure, a lot of pressure on the team to get that shot. And finally, the guy who bolted it, his name was Masson, uh, he gave in,
Shipped a bit.
and he had to do that. And he told,
Wow.
and I met him years later. I met him in 2017, and he said it's one of the things in my climbing life that I'm the least proud of.
I
But
mean, I can imagine.
I
Yeah,
had to do it. And this was part of the sort of historic uh, ethical war that was going on in Humpy at the time between, the Germans who were like, if there can be three bolts in a route, yeah, let's go for it. The French who were very much for turning it into a sport climbing area. And oftentimes there were these things that were done. And, the English who were very, trad or nothing or highball or nothing.
yeah.
And there was a bit of warfare. So what Bill and his friends would do is they would find out which routes are going to get bolted the following morning. bit of like espionage. And the previous evening, they would go and solo them. And they'd be like, yeah, but this route is done, so you can't bolt it. What you gonna do? And it
Wow.
was pretty much how bolting was phased out of Humpy, man. It's up. I mean, someone's got to
Yeah.
take a stand. And I'm with
Yeah.
Bill. I'm
Yeah.
completely with on
Yeah.
this.
I guess there's a lot of stories that just kind of lost to time. But going back to development, and this is I have one last question about development before. I know there's one topic that you want to talk about is the finances of being a
Oh,
climber in India as well. But one last question about development. When we were talking earlier, you had mentioned that um, a lot of people have imposter syndrome with development, right? Like
hmm,
they think like, oh, I'm not at the level yet to be a developer. I'm not at the level yet to maybe bolt a route or to find a line or something like that. But in your opinion, what is the maybe minimum that somebody should know about climbing in order to start developing bouldering, sport climbing, whatever?
nothing, to be honest with you. Like, if you climb, you can
Really?
put it up. I mean, of course, with bouldering, I'd say you need to know how to place pads. Um,
Yeah.
Depending on the area, you need to know what is excessive brushing and what isn't, and what kind of brush to use, and how much moss you should remove and how much you should not touch. And I mean, but this is all stuff that you learn on the fly. I mean, there's
Hmm.
no school for brushing, and there's no brushing certificate. Um this is one of those things that is passed on through communal mentorship, and it's okay. And I think, in
Yeah.
our extremely technocratic world, I think it's okay for these kind of things to exist. I would rather not have an app where you look at brushing ethics and uh, learn how to brush based on area input and so on and so forth. But other than this sort of non-climbing and non-movement knowledge, I think it's something that should be part of people's climbing journey from the get-go. Sure, it helps to have a base where you've climbed a lot of the established stuff that's out there, and you've come to a certain level where you can understand movement, perform on problems of a different grade. But you know, once you get into that trap and you believe that this is the entry point. If I'm not climbing 8A, then I have no business developing. If I'm not climbing 7B, then I have no business even attempting to bolt a route. There's no end to that.
Yep.
Because when you climb
No.
8A, you're like, yeah, well, I really should be at least 8B plus if I'm going to be doing this. And when you're climbing 8B plus,
Yeah.
you're like, yeah, but V16 is really where it's at. And I think this is
Yeah.
something that climbing is suffering from globally. I've had a lot of conversations with friends about this, and I say there's a lot of impressive athletes in the climbing scene right now in the world, but there's still not as many inspiring athletes. Uh, that's a distinction where you need to be operating at a certain impressive athletic level, but
Yeah.
also have artistic vision to put that into practice.
Yeah.
And it never comes once you've just passed the gate. There is no gate.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I,
No,
I, I can
no,
certainly.
I mean, I agree with you. I remember after the first time I bolted, like after I bolted my first route, every time I saw any rock, I was just like, oh yeah, I could bowl this. This could be a line.
Yeah,
But before that, I was so stuck to just like, okay, this is what's there. This is what somebody else has done before me, and I can't really do anything
yeah,
myself. And it's not like the
yeah.
strongest climber in the world, but I mean, I would love to add more to the community in India because it's something that you wrote in one of your articles. India is one of the few places in the world where there's more rock than there are roots, right? And the danger that we have here is
Oh,
all our rock being
absolutely.
quarried. But anyway, like moving, we could talk about this a lot, but I do want to discuss
We have a
finances. Ah,
we have a stupid amount of rock, man, and
yeah,
like an infinite amount of rock.
we do. But a
And
lot of it is
it can't
in
all
danger
be.
of being quarried. Like Hampi is in
It
danger
is
of being
being
quarried.
quarried.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It's
In
not in
Bronze as
danger of
well.
being quarried. It is being quarried.
Yeah. But in terms of like the finances, the finance side of things, because I remember when we were talking earlier, this is something you really wanted to talk about as well, right? Like
Mm.
quite simply, how the hell do you sustain yourself when you're
Oh,
in
it's hard.
Sethan for like, I don't know, 6 months out of the year?
So I mean, by trade, I work in audio. I mean, I've been in radio and the audio content space for a really long time. I write, and that includes journalistic work and non-journalistic work. And now I'm also coaching climbers and doing some
Hmm.
storytelling consultancy and a bunch of these things. My partner is a jewelry artist. She's a end-to-end handmade jewelry artist, and so she makes and sells really, really nice stuff. That's a very reductive
Okay.
way of, but yeah. And so between the two of us, we do somehow manage to, keep it together. We live lean. We live really lean. And but yeah, it's just about enough to get through.
I mean,
And
if a young climber was to come to you and say like, "Hey man, I want to climb full time,"
mm,
um, and he asks you, "What do you think is the minimum amount of money that I need to make?" Maybe the second question is, "Where do I get it from?" But like, what would you tell this person?
mhm.
How much do they need to make to be able to climb full time, to be able to sustain themselves, have a decent enough diet as an athlete, and then where the hell should they get that money from?
Okay, so first of all, it depends on where you stay. All right. If you are staying in the mountains, if you're staying in Himachal, you're staying in a place like Hampi, if you decide to relocate to a place like that, you can obviously make do with less compared to staying in a city. But for the purposes of this particular discussion, I'm just going to assume that you're staying in a city because you also have access to climbing gyms and SNC gyms and a larger community, and and that in turn allows you to um, plan trips, take decisions in a collaborative way. Man, in a city, less than 50,000 is really, really hard. I would say
Yeah.
the bare minimum
But I
is
think
the bare.
let's say in the mountains, because if you're going to be a professional climber, like who's climbing all the time, you are going to live
Mm.
in the mountains, right? You're going to live in the mountains or Hampi or Badami or
Not
something like that.
necessarily. Not necessarily. It depends on what your pathway is, right? So that's why I
Yeah.
said if you want to be a rock climber or someone who's
Hmm.
focused entirely on rock, then that's
Yeah.
one story and that has its own budgets. But if you want to be someone who's focused on the competition circuit, then that's another story. But either ways, I think 50,000 is like that baseline.
Threshold. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
can sponsorships get them there? Like today's sponsorship landscape?
Um, do potential sponsors have the money? Of course they do. Do they have the intent? I'm doubtful. Do they have the awareness? I'm doubtful. I mean, are they often like, is this money and decisions around how these finances are going to be allocated, are these decisions put in the hands of people who have a very, very slim understanding of climbing and its entire ecosystem? Definitely yes. Because it's this, there's too much of this ROI mentality, too much, way too much. You have foundations, and I'm more than happy to name names over here. Someone like Go Sports, they drop a few lakhs, support a couple of athletes for a couple of years, competitive athletes, and then when these athletes don't give them the results that they wanted, that's it. Your contract's done. And it's such a heartbreaking thing for me to see, um, because you can't expect people who train in the gyms of Bangalore and Delhi in a space of 2 years to suddenly make World Cup podium or make World Cup finals or any of those things. Man, you have to realistically assess what your metrics of progress are. Like if
Yeah.
you've been climbing 7C and you are at 8A plus, that's huge. That's humongous. And if you've been climbing 8A plus and you're getting close to 8B or 8B plus, that's humongous.
Yeah.
If you've never made the top 50, but you're now clocking around 37, 40, 41, 42, it's huge. Because in the World Cups, anyone, man, from 1 all the way to 30, they're all give or take at the same level, you know?
Yeah.
So, the way that competition athletes are sponsored, I think it's not sustainable. and it's very much driven by an intent to say, oh, look, we put in a bit of money into this person, and now look, they're bringing India glory. Now, when it comes to rock athletes, I think, again, no, I don't see an interest at all. I just don't.
Yeah.
I see an inordinate amount of interest in supporting mountaineering expeditions, and not like actual alpinists, but people who want to do guided mountain
Yeah.
trip, call them, or whatever, guided ascents. But no, there's just unfortunately not enough interest and enough of a framework and enough channels to even have a meeting with these people saying, hey guys, there's this thing called bouldering. It's amazing. It's scientifically proven to even cure or be very therapeutic for depression and mental health and la 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 la. It's also one of the most age and gender agnostic sports in the world. How about you take interest? It's
Yeah.
super hard.
No,
So,
I remember back in the day, like 10 years ago, when Tuhin got first sponsored by Red Bull. That was a big thing. But since then, the amount of sponsorships that I've seen in the Indian rock climbing scene are really not that many. It's been quite
but that
scant.
was,
Like even Decathlon, that's trying to go so much deeper into the Indian rock climbing scene. You see Decathlon bloody everywhere. I'm at a friend's climbing gym right now, and I can see Decathlon everywhere. But who are they sponsoring? Uh, yeah, not much that I've
it's,
heard of.
I wouldn't even phrase that question that way. I wouldn't say who, I would say what, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, like, and I've
yeah,
always argued this. If Decathlon were to put down 10 crash pads for Sethan, if they were to put down
mm,
10 crash pads to, in Badami or Hampi or any of these big areas, man, you are setting an entire area's infrastructure up to work on repeat. And it's there for everybody.
yeah,
All right. Um, Forget Decathlon. And like, when it comes to the international brands, the North Face and Black Diamond and Bloody Blue, it's incredibly performative. They kind of come in
yeah,
here, they make their films, they do their namastes, and then they leave. And it would cost you very, very little to actually have a global south type of scheme in your company where a certain amount of money or a certain amount of gear goes to countries which are your non-primary markets. And again, this whole infrastructure is incredibly nepotistic. It's very who knows who, and who did you go for a coffee with, and who's your neighbor in Colorado.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's a lot of gatekeeping innately,
yeah.
and
I mean, I'm hoping that we'll be able to change that in the upcoming years. I mean, climbing is growing quite a bit in India, right? And I'm sure through the kind of through the kind of films that are being made, the media that's coming out about climbing in India. I mean, we are seeing a lot of these stories coming out, and I think I can imagine the next few years it should be changing. Um, but I mean, at the current moment, it's difficult to be an athlete, a climbing athlete. I
next
mean,
coming
yeah,
yeah, the coming years, I've heard that, I've heard that
that's
in some form or fashion for a while now. If you want to
that's
invest in a scene that's growing, or you want to take a scene somewhere, you do it now.
yeah.
You
What
do
should
it
we
when the
what
scene
should we
needs
do?
your help. Huh?
What, like, as a community, what should we do? Like, the people who are listening to this right now, what should they do?
Okay. For I mean, in your personal capacity, if you have old gear, you have stuff that you're not using, donate it. Don't sell it. Donate it. If you have someone that introduce them to climbing. Uh, and to be honest, that's as much as individuals can do, right?
Yeah,
And um, the way I look at this whole thing, right? As long as sponsor ecosystems depend on individual heroes and hero stories, which is something that here in India we tend to depend on quite a bit, it's not really sustainable. So climbing has to be tied to something bigger than climbing itself. And in my opinion, that is the general health outcomes of the public, and in particular cardiovascular health outcomes of the public, because India has got a cardiovascular health problem. It is not a secret. We are not a healthy country when it comes to cardiac health. Our cities, our infrastructure, the environment design does not suit physical culture and physical lifestyles. And unfortunately, the genetic baseline risk is significantly higher. But
Yeah.
climbing offers people community. It offers you a lifelong sport, one where you can peak very, very, very late. It offers you great mental health, and
Yeah.
it offers you a chance to participate in nature and therefore become a steward in a way that is not a LinkedIn post.
So you're
Where
saying change the narrative. The
yes,
narrative of climbing right now is that like, oh, look at these adventure-seeking crazy guys.
climbing is
Look at
so
this insane shit
cool.
that they're doing. But change the narrative that it is something that anybody can do, and
Yes,
that you can
and
do it. You don't
anyone
have to
can
be
do it.
young. Yeah, yeah, I agree with you, and that it's something that's amazing for your health. There's a guy in our Google Meets chat who just mentioned fund of funds, and I was recently climbing somewhere outside India, and I tried to.
Mm,
I saw this poster. It said the Filipino bolting fund, and I've seen that in the US as well, right? They
mm,
have this access fund, and I've spoken to so
mm.
many people in India about, oh, it would be so great to have a bolting fund, to have a development fund. And even you and I spoke about this a couple of days ago that the problem that keeps happening is that it becomes very political. And there are fights about it and stuff like that. And it's a dream that I have as well that look, it would be amazing to have a access fund style thing over here in India, but
Mm.
it's probably not as realistic, at least from what's happened in the past. But yeah, going forward, maybe I don't know.
Look, there are things that even enemies can come together on, right? Of course, in any scene, here is where I think we tend to have it wrong at times. In India, we tend to think that the Indian scene is very political. Every scene is political. Believe me, I have seen the European dirt. I have seen the rivalries. The I'm not even going to go to this boulder if X is there. I've seen all of that. Okay, so this narrative that Indians are, very uniquely crab-like in their need to want to pull others down. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true. I just think it's human nature, and it's something that's amplified because you know
Yeah,
the size of the Indian community is so small now, and there are bound to be conflicts
yeah,
of interest, which is okay, which is the natural curve of how any sport, anything develops.
yeah.
Even in a place like, to go slightly off course here, even in a place like Jamaica, which is the sprinting sort of capital of the world, oh man,
Oh,
there are
yeah.
camps. There are camps, where athlete A does not get along with athlete B. Their coaches don't get along. There are all these camps. It's the innate nature of sport. And what I think is, if we are solving some larger social problem through climbing, then people can say, listen, I may not like you, but I also agree that this is a problem, and you agree that this is a problem too. So we can unite over here.
Yeah.
And I think climbing is capable of solving a lot of social problems. In my opinion, cardiovascular health, uh, it's one of the most amazing preventive tools. Man, you hear
Yeah.
cardiologists all the time say, lifestyle, change your lifestyle, take less stress. How? How
Climbing.
exactly? You know, I mean, you do need to have an outlet for that, right? And I think
Yeah.
another forgotten and unfortunately willfully so category of people in India are senior citizens. Man, people have just thrown in the towel on them. Once someone is in their late 50s, you're just a retiree, and then that's it. Off you go into attrition. Why?
Dude,
It is
the
best
the gym I'm
sports.
at right now,
Yep,
there were multiple 65 plus year olds climbing yesterday, and it was
that's
so cool
wonderful.
to see them climbing. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. It's a fantastic sport that's for everyone, and it the marketing so far has been that, oh, it's only for young people, but maybe you're right. We need to change the narrative. We need to change the marketing. But on that note, I do want to talk about. I want to change course a bit and talk about the young guy in your life, right? Like how you raised Arlo as well, and then
Oh,
we
that
we
guy. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that guy. Sort of important guy in your life.
Mm.
And how he recently climbed his first 8A, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, And when we spoke the other day, you were talking about how you guys took a very purposeful way of raising him, not getting him into. Actually, why don't you describe it? How did you raise Arlo around the development that you were doing around climbing? What was the your philosophy?
Wow, that's a bit of a broad stroke.
It is.
Oof. Um, you know, it was just that there were two things that happened when I became a parent, right? The first was panic. And I want to be very, very honest about that. I don't want to sit here and pretend like everything was hunky dory and I was just like cruising into this new phase. No, man, I did have moments where I was like, oh my God, am I going to be able to climb and, do this life
I mean, how
anymore? Or am
did
I going to?
how did it change your relationship with risk? Because were you thinking that I should be taking less risks now?
No, no, that wasn't a thing. So that's what I'll go along with this, right? Let me
Hmm.
just finish this point.
Hmm.
So there was a sort of panic for lack of direction because you weren't reading a lot of stories about climbers who were peaking after they became parents or even climbing very, very seriously after they became parents. One of the few examples that was out there was that of the Italian climber Christian Core. uh, and Christian, he had obviously put up some of the hardest boulder problems in the world, and he had moved to Squamish with his family. And here and there, there were pictures of him climbing with his kids and his wife, and he was still going hard. So, that was one of those examples that I had out there. But man, there really weren't a lot. So I did have those questions as to will I even be able to do this or keep up? Um, and from that came a certain type of reluctance to give in. I was like, of course I'm going to be able to do this. Who cares if there isn't a blueprint? Who cares if, I don't know, person XYZ is cracking some, hey, bugger, you got to slow down now, dude, you're going to be a dad kind of joke, right? So I think a lot of all this came from the desire to not change and to remain childlike myself. And my partner Ale, she was wonderful in the way that she understood this and she shared this philosophy. And man, we rolled with it. That's it. From the time Arlo was 7 months old, he traveled with us, and he would travel out to the crag with me, and then he'd be napping on a tiny little crash pad when I was out. Then I was just right next to him and I was climbing. And yeah, we lived like that during the early years, as in we just didn't see it as an option to be otherwise. And so
Hmm.
by the time he was 1.5 or 2, he was completely integrated into this as a way of living.
Oh, yeah, I
So,
mean, that's
and
nice.
we'd found our
So,
rhythm too.
so what is he like right now? Is he very competitive? Is that how he was able to climb 8A? Or like, what is his relationship with the rock?
Yeah, so I'll just elaborate a little bit, right? So and then from the time um yeah, so basically from the time he was about a year and a half or something, he was always playing around on rock and climbing stuff. And then, gradually it just more and more and more just became a part of his life. And then we had this very fixed routine as to, how we feed him and how we take him out. And obviously you can't leave a 2-year-old at home when you're going off. So he was always there with us. And as a result of that, he walked a lot. And he was in all these different sectors. And he was always playing around. And as he grew older, he climbed, and then he climbed some more, and he climbed more and more and more. So it was a very organic thing. And at one point, we decided very consciously to homeschool him because we didn't want to be tied to the city. And we did not want to be locked into that schedule of, you know, summer vacations and, Dasara holidays and Christmas holidays. And otherwise, you have to be city, right? And I mean, rock just leaves your life
Yeah.
if you're locked into that cycle. And that was a very conscious decision that we took. And homeschooling is always a bit of, It's trial and error, trial and error. It's kind of like tinkering on a project. You find a way that works, and then you move to the next move. Then you find a way that
Mm.
works, and you move to the next and the next. And there's obviously enough research, enough resources, and a surprising number of people in India that are homeschooling. In fact, in and around my place in Bangalore itself, there's like 44 families that are homeschooling,
Wow.
in a space of 3 to 4 blocks. So we were quite surprised at how prevalent this is. And, that allowed us to breathe a bit. We were like, okay, man, there's a lot of people, with this philosophy on this path for whatever reasons. So, that happened, climbing and travel continued, and we had this little rhythm, and it was
Mm.
like three inseparable parts that all is one.
I mean, that's really beautiful. I'll be honest, you're actually the first person I've met who's homeschooled in India. I think we now need to move to the questions that people asked. And
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think one of the first questions I kind of want to pick up is what role do you think businesses should play in the development of climbing in India in a way that's mutually beneficial? And I actually want to be more specific than that, is manufacturing, right? I am a manufacturer myself. So
Mm,
for me, that's something that hits close to home.
mm,
Obviously, there's very little climbing gear manufacturing that happens in India. Like, what is your
mm.
take on manufacturing in India, like businesses and how they should be integrated with the sport?
I mean, that eventually we do need to come to a point where a lot of climbing gear is manufactured in India, right? But we got to look at the lowest hanging fruit first. And I would say, crash pads are the easiest to manufacture. If we get, I mean, there are manufacturers at the moment, but there's still work to be done on the
Mm.
materials that they use. But if we get to a point where there's 3 to 4 different companies manufacturing pads of a really good quality and offering them at a competitive enough rate, even the same rate as organic and Petzl and all of this stuff, even or maybe 1,000 or 2,000 rupees less, I think people are going to buy. For once, we're going to have a place that we can buy pads from and not ask a friend who can ask a friend who can ask a friend, right?
Yeah.
The second, and this is already happening, um, would be hold manufacturing. For gyms to grow eventually, it has to be a hybrid of imported holes and enough high quality holes that are being manufactured within the country. And for a while there, we were stuck with, imitation holes and,
Mm.
holes that were basically copies of designs from elsewhere. But I think there are some
Yeah.
incredible hole shapers in India at the moment. And
Yeah.
one of them is Sandeep Mehdi. And, he's got
Yeah.
his company, Mighty Holes, and his artistic output has been phenomenal, man. And Sandeep's also been someone I've shared a relationship with in terms of hard climbing, and there was a point when he was also a bit of a mentor to me. But right now, the work that he's doing with his holes, incredible,
Yeah, man. I've seen the catalog of his holes. They're beautiful.
top
I've
notch,
never climbed on them, but I would love to try them sometime.
top notch.
Uh
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. Like you said, artistic, right? Artistic of hold molders. It's really
absolutely.
beautiful. So there's one interesting question. I'm planning to climb barefoot with some chalk on my foot.
Hmm.
Any advice? I saw your article with where you're talking about Albert,
Yep, yep,
the barefoot Charles,
yep.
and him climbing with your son Arlo.
Yeah, yeah.
That was some interesting photos as well. And I recently watched a very long video with Charles as well. I mean, just what was it like to learn, I guess, climbing barefoot?
Oh,
And I guess to also answer this person's question about should they put chalk on their feet?
oh, it was amazing, dude. I think it's the most intuitive and natural way of climbing. It's the most tactile, the most sensory. It's if you were to ask me, you know, if climbing were not a sport but just human movement, then this is the way that we should climb. And I think it is the highest form of climbing, the most natural and the most versatile. It's incredible. Uh,
Yeah.
there are situations where shoes help, but from what I learned, And earlier this, I mean, last year, oh my God, I can't believe we're in 2026. But yes, in October 2025, that was my first real experience climbing bare feet. It was mind blowing. Arlo climbs bare feet a lot now. He
Right. That would be
thoroughly
amazing.
enjoys it.
Yeah. No,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
remember I
So whether you should use chalk or not, yes, you should use chalk. And
no, I remember
please.
I climbed a route barefoot, like I did it on top
Mm,
rope, and in the middle of the
mm.
route, my feet got so sweaty I had to actually chalk up my feet in the middle of the route as well.
Ye-
It's an interesting
Yeah,
experience.
it may not be the most ideal for southern granite, because southern granite is very
Yeah,
sharp, and it's a lot about dead pointing and toeing in. But the
yeah,
thing is, the way you climb with shoes and the way you climb bare feet, it's completely different. So you end up smearing a lot. You end up using your foot as this sort of big flat paddle that you can screw on. So the way you use your feet change a lot.
on
So
that, I do have a
take some
question.
time.
In a lot of Charles's videos, you can see that he's literally crimping with his toes.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Is he like? Are you able to do that as well? Have you tried that? Like,
Yeah,
what
I
does it
can, I
feel like?
can.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, so if this is a hold, then so I would just go like that, you
Wow.
know. So yeah, but it's a very natural human movement. But the thing is,
Mm,
when you're with shoes, you wouldn't really do that. You're using the whole thing, so you're
yeah,
pulling down,
yeah,
using your hamstrings entirely. But here you can separate these toes and then sort
yeah.
of really pull in, and it's mind blowing, man.
Very unique way of climbing for sure. Just looking back at the questions, um, I think we already discussed this one. What are the main factors to consider before starting to develop an area for sport climbing, bouldering, whatever it is? I
With
guess we did really
with
this. Yeah.
sport, I think it's a bit different to bouldering, but in general, I would say access. You know,
Mm,
um, access the and by access I mean, okay, a road, a path, or whatever that gets you to the crag, and then a village, a town, or whatever nearby where you can stay and hopefully base yourself for a long enough period of time. And the third would obviously be nutrition. Without good food, or at least access to cooking, over time your form depletes. So what you can do, it slowly gets a bit limited, because to truly climb well, you also need to live well, and that is fairly essential. And I would say, if you're starting off with bolting, obviously look for faces that don't need that much of cleaning or re-cleaning, because there are sometimes these faces where you bolt a route, and if no one's climbed on it for about 3 to 4 years, plants have grown back, moss has grown back, and then you need to re-clean the entire thing. So ideally, the faces that don't need that much of re-cleaning, those would be the best. And the long walls and the long cliffs where there can be a multiple,
one after the
where there
other.
can be routes of different difficulty levels. So if you have like 7A, 7B, 7C, 8B, 8B plus 8, 9A, 9A plus whatever, it's a nice little band of routes where you can warm up, second stage warm up, end stage
Mm,
project. But again, man, you get what you get. You know, if you want to customize it to that level, then you should just climb in a gym. So you see something, if it's an inspiring line, bolt it. But with
yeah.
bouldering, yeah, it's kind of, I've already gone over that. I think I didn't answer the
Yeah.
question that you asked me about Arlo, as in, is he competitive and how he climbed the grade. No, he's not. I would say he's in love. Like, he's
Mm,
very analytical, and he's very critical of himself.
mm,
And, so he's a hyper analytical type. And so we sit and discuss and analyze movements, and, what could work and what couldn't work and all of those things. But it's never really one of these, I need to prove a point and I need to do it before X or Y. And, that's not really his motivation at all. Like, if he likes the
yeah.
features, if he likes the way, the line climbs, he'll go at it. And if he doesn't, he doesn't. And that's something we always discuss before. Like, you like the line. If you like the
Mm,
line, I'm here to support you all day and night, and we'll work on it.
That's
Otherwise,
actually one thing I loved in one of your articles where you mentioned that before Arlo gets on a climb, even if you know the grade of the route, you won't tell him what the grade is, or you guys don't discuss the grade. And so
no, we never discuss grades.
you just ask like, oh, does this line appeal to you?
Yeah, we never discuss grades. It kind of sort of,
Uh,
like, I don't know, to me it taints the process. And
yeah.
not just for him, for me too. I don't like it. Not I know it, and even when I'm on, my projects, I know whereabouts it will fall.
Mm,
But to me, when the conversation opens with, "Oh, is this 8A?" No, sorry, like it's not the way I would like to approach a climb. That's it. And I seek out stuff that's really, really hard, but like I seek it out because I think the hard lines are beautiful in terms of the movement and the complexity and the puzzles they provide you. And it's that
yeah.
which speaks to me. And it's that story that I want to be able to rise to, not
Hmm.
the check mark. I want to be able to improve my vocabulary and my skill to be able to read that story and unlock that melody and sort of make it a thing for other people to also, uh, yeah, have their own experiences on. That's the
Yeah.
way I look at it.
I mean, it's definitely a bad habit I need to get out of as well. I'm just like, oh, am I able to do that? What's the grade like? Is it too hard for me? And I think I should probably just like get on stuff that maybe is too hard for me and just, like you said, learn the movement, figure it
Absolutely.
out myself. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Everyone should be getting on stuff that's too hard for them, man. Everyone.
Yeah. Yeah. And
It's
let
the
my
only
ego
way you
die.
really break through.
I agree. But on Arlo, there was actually a question.
Mm.
What would you think do if your kid wouldn't want to climb anymore?
Hoo-hoo-hoo. Ain't that a interesting one? I mean, the first thing for me is to meet him where he is, right? It's to understand what makes him happy and what feeds his soul. That's that's my job as a parent, to create experiences in climbing or outside of climbing or whatever that makes his soul happy. And then he, as a human being, will obviously have his preferences.
Yeah.
And it's my job to sort of facilitate and sort of support him in those preferences. So, I don't think about it that way. The way I think about it is, how can we make this something emotionally endearing? And how can we make this something fun and adventurous? And, yeah, uh, something that builds memories. I don't think about it as, oh, but what if he doesn't want to? Well, cross that bridge when it comes. But, that's not even something that's on my mind. Of course, I'd support him, you know?
No. I mean, yeah, of course. I can totally see that. I think I have one last question.
Yep.
This is a personal question
Yep.
about athletic performance
Hmm.
and development. And this is something we've spoken about earlier as well, is
Mm.
that you can't de-link athletic performance from development. What do you mean by that, and why is it so important for you to be an athlete first, even when you're developing?
I mean, what is development, right? So it's ultimately the actualization of potential. So if you see a potential line, collection of features that align perfectly, and okay, this thing climbs, what's the next step? To be able to do that line
Yeah,
and whatever, propose a difficulty grade, give it a name, blah, 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 whatever. And then, share it with people, so on and so forth. Um, so you got to think of it. I'm going to give you an analogy and then I'll kind of come right back into the climbing. So think of
yeah,
it like this. If you have an interest in reading, it's like asking, why should I expand my vocabulary? So you can read different types of books, uh, different, you can access different layers and styles of storytelling. And there's just so much more for you to read. Otherwise, you're limited to
yeah,
the first standard syllabus. So the same thing applies to development. In order to actualize all these potential lines, you need to be able to do these moves. And in order to do
Yeah.
these moves, you need to train and build your skill and athleticism and mobility and all of these things, all these physical factors and then the mental ones. You need to build it up to a point where you can make this happen. So you can never de-link training and athleticism, and I will very openly say climbing gyms from development. It's all interconnected. Anything that helps you become a better version of climber will help you get out there and actualize more lines. And the more lines you actualize, the more the community has, and then the more inspiration they have to take that and then go and do that in their own way. It's kind of like, the climbing version of a pyramid marketing scheme. It's the it's
Yeah.
it's the building block.
Yeah. So Dylan, the podcast and the climbing podcast gods have inserted a new question into my head.
Okay.
That god being Tanvi.
Okay.
Uh,
Hmm.
when people talk about Indian climbing 20 years from now, where
Hmm.
do you want your name to sit?
Oh my god, a legacy question. Jeez, dudes.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think about that, man. I mean, I don't sort of like, future cast, but if I do have to take that question on, I would like for people to think that I did something that pushed the needle, and I put up lines that moved people and that became, meaningful checkpoints in their lives and their climbing journeys. If people are to say, man, fucking awesome line. Who did that? Oh, that was Dylan's line. That it makes me happy, dude. Such cool moves. What a feature! When I get these reactions, it makes me happy. That's it.
Yeah.
It's not about where I want to be held in, you know, the goat conversation and those kind of things. So, of course, that stuff gets into my head from time to time, but I delink from it. But really, I want to be seen as someone who's done something meaningful and uh, something that's moved people. And by virtue of moving people, that's moved the sport ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, by developing 400 lines in Sethan and making Sethan a hub for climbing in India,
Mm.
for bouldering India, I think you have definitely moved the needle. So Dhilan, yeah, sorry.
No, I
Go
was
ahead,
just
please
gonna
go ahead.
say that like I've barely scratched the surface of the potential over there, man. And like I would say that I'm not even yet remotely satisfied with what I've done, and that discontent does continue to drive me.
Yeah.
Maybe in some years when I think, okay, man, I think there are enough eighth graded problems over here. There's, like it, what I dreamed of about 10, 15 years ago, where people would fetishize a single 8A. We have loads and loads and dozens and dozens and dozens of these eighth graded problems. So nobody has to really think about buying a ticket to Switzerland and paying obnoxious prices to go climb in Magic Woods.
Magic words. Yeah.
Um, yeah, when we reach that point, it would make me genuinely happy. It would make me feel like, man, I've done something of value, of meaning. There was a question that I would like to feed into this,
Mm.
which is one from a friend who asked me about, what I have to say to people uh, who think of peaking later in their 30s or in their mid 30s, and
Oh yeah.
training and so on and so forth. Oof. So the first thing I would say is discontent, right? You got to keep that discontent alive. The
Yeah.
second you kind of resign and you're like, dude, I'm too old for this shit. I can't. This hard stuff is just for the young kids. Once you start having that conversation, it kind of begins as a joke, but the more you say it, the more you internally start believing it, and the more your body
Yeah.
just slowly switches off from even trying to rise to that level. Um, the second is, man, ditch the shitty habits, ditch the smoking pot, ditch the drinking, or if you really can't, bring it down to a reasonable level of control. But from an actual training perspective, I think what helps a lot is an acceptance of the fact that you should prioritize quality over quantity. Do not be looking at the guys who are doing 6 days a week, 5 days a week, whatever, because there are different physiologies in the world, right? There are people who train 6 days a week. And then there's someone like Charles who climbs 1 day on, 5 days off. That's a
Yeah.
schedule. And
Yeah.
they all operate at a top level. So
Yeah.
there is no way of climbing that makes you hardcore. The only thing that makes you hardcore is what you're actually climbing. And there may be different routes to it. Quality, prioritize intent. Don't just go really become critical, analytical, fine-tune your movement on every single warm-up, on every single thing you do. And then when you have the actual, like, start doing drills to address skill deficits. If your trail leg is weak, if you're bad at heel hooking, if you're bad at toe hooking, if you're bad at closed boxes, open, like extended boxes, whatever it may be, right? Start doing isolated drills to address that. It may look silly and someone may say, hey dude, why aren't you just climbing? No, I'm actually working on a skill in a very specific way. And during the actual hard climbing, intent is everything. Honesty of effort is everything. There is 0 point in you giving 7 to 10 attempts when you can give 3 quality attempts. So become that person who'd rather give 3 quality attempts as opposed to 7, meh attempts. And then walk out with enough in the tank. Do not climb to fatigue. Walk out when you start losing snap. And as a general rule of thumb, mobility helps. Strength work, resistance training helps. And don't get swept away by the feeling that you're not climbing enough. Instead, ask, was my previous session of a pretty high quality? If it was, you've gotten the input that you need and your body's gonna do the intake. Stay at it. Try hard, try hard, try hard, try hard. It comes. You'd be amazed. I keep telling the story of this Japanese guy who started climbing at 38. And at 48, he climbed his first 8C boulder, V15.
Whoa.
At 48.
Whoa.
Right? So there's no reason at all to throw in the towel. Climbing is that type of sport. There's no reason to say, I'm too old to climb hard. No, you are if you think you are. All of my hard climbing has come after the age of 33 or something like that.
As a 40-something climber who's speaking now, 40, almost 40. No, I'm not 40-something yet. Almost 40. It's nice to hear that. It's nice to hear that. Yeah, that there's still a lot left in the tank that we can still, if we train with intent, there's still a lot that we can do.
Absolutely. There's plenty left.
Yeah. I keep hearing that phrase, train with intent. And every time I go to the gym, I just lose all that intent in the greed of just trying to climb as much as I can. And, go for that, hard pink one in the corner, dude, I want to fucking send that. And then I just lose all that intent immediately. It is what it is, I guess. But mental training is as important as the physical one, I guess.
They are the same thing, really. Like if you look at them as one whole, then you approach a climb in a more sort of wholesome way. Like you can go for the hard pink one in the corner, except do one move, video yourself, look at your body position, look at your grip, look at different, are your hips spinning inwards or are they spinning outwards? Then go into the second position and see how your body feels on that. Then move from position to position. Hard climbing is all about position to position climbing. It's not hold to hold. It's position to position. And then be super analytical and intentional about the way you try. Hip intelligence, foot intelligence. Think of how you're driving a lot of pressure through your toe. Tighten your ankle, tighten your calves, your hamstrings. Like really zone in. It's meditative. Give that one attempt and then take off. Chill out for 10 minutes, no problem. And then give another. And the input to your body from a kinesthetic standpoint is brilliant. And there's a
Yeah.
lot of new research that shows the idea that neuroplasticity is kind of gone at a certain age. That's an outdated school,
Hmm.
right? So whether it's the brain or the body,
Yeah.
uh, you learn and you evolve unto a much, much later point than was previously believed.
Ah, fair enough. So, Dylan, I think we're gonna have to call it now. I feel like we could have chatted for hours and hours longer,
Yep, we could have.
but it is what it is.
Yep.
Thank you so much. I mean, thanks a lot for this chat, man. I think there's a lot of insight about training, about development, about everything to do with the Indian climbing scene that you shared with everybody today. So, thanks a lot for that. And if you have any parting words, please let me know.
Yo, I don't know, man. I don't have a fancy parting thing. It's just that I barely feel like I've offered enough because I think we should at some point consider doing an entirely different conversation around training and nutrition and all of that because those are topics I feel very strongly about. But
Yeah.
really, my parting words would be around imposter syndrome. I think there's a side of us that all believes we're not worth it or we're not there, and it's okay, fight through it. When I went back to Sethan after the first time I was there, November of 2016, I called Ale from the airport, almost in a panicky way, being like, "Listen, man, who am I kidding? Am I really the guy to do this? Am I being a bit too presumptuous of what I can accomplish over here, develop an area?" And she was the one who sort of like whacked me in a place and said, "Of course not. Go. What's wrong with you? Like you should throw yourself in it. It feels uncomfortable, and you're gonna have naysayers. You're gonna have people being like, 'Come on, dude, you're punching above your weight, bloody blue.' It's okay. Let them say it. Let them. I don't even want to say develop a thick skin. Let them say what they have to say. If
Mhm.
they're gonna get that, sort of joke on with that, you please get your hire on that. But um, yeah, imposter syndrome is not easy. We all live with it. So you have to keep
Yeah.
focusing on the small wins. And that takes you a long way. That's, I guess, the big parting philosophical nugget.
And
Yeah,
that's how we're going to get more crags in India, right? Is by people believing that they can do it. They
100%.
can do. Yeah. All right.
100%. Don't wait for someone to come and do this. Don't wait for sponsored climber from the North Face team from wherever to come and put up all the hard routes so we can then go and try them. Nope. Put the hard shit up yourself. Keep working at it. It's not going to come easily. Keep working at it, working at it, working at it. And then all of a sudden you'll realize that, hey, 7C used to take me a lot of time. And now that happens quick. 8A used to take me a lot of time. And now it happens quick. 8B is happening quicker than before. It will happen, but you have to get started. Otherwise, you're just going to be stuck with a lot of potential, a lot of boulders, but not enough bouldering.
And that is, I think, the story of Indian rock climbing right now. A lot of potential, but not enough, I guess, outcome from the potential.
I mean, and we only have ourselves to hold accountable. That's about it. We cannot be complaining and going on about, oh, yeah, but this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And, we all have these limitations. And I'm not being very harsh over here. I'm just saying do what you
Mhm.
can do within reasonable range. If you can only give 2 weeks in a year, that's fine. Go to Kolar, go to Bangarpet side. Man, is like endless boulder fields over there. Go put up 10 lines. It doesn't matter. It could be 5C, it could be 6A, it could be 7A, it doesn't matter. Put them up and then go again and then go again. But 3 visits later, you will realize that where there were 0 lines, there are now 40. And where there were 40, there are now 100. And by the time you reach 100, you will be putting up 7B and C. And by the time you reach 150, you'd be putting up 8A and 8A plus. That's just the way it goes. But you got to get started.
Thanks for an amazing chat, Dylan. I hope this chat inspires people. And by the time we talk next, a
Hopefully.
year
Yeah.
down the line, there's 100 new crags across India because of this chat. But
Well, I'm
who
good.
knows?
I'm good if there's one or two, man. Like even if
Yeah,
not 100, if there's 100 new lines, that's like a bango. But like even
yeah.
one is great.
Oh, I completely agree.
Yeah,
Anyway, thanks a lot. Have a great
yeah,
night, Dylan, and it was great chatting with you.
yeah, man.
Good night.
Likewise. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Yeah, yeah. Bye bye.